Well, hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graven. Our guest today is Twyla Verhelst. She lives and breathes accounting. She's a CPA, tech entrepreneur, and she's now the leader of the Accounting Professionals program at the company FreshBooks. She's working to empower accounting professionals with the tools they need to thrive, as well as helping them discover their most important tool, their authentic self. So we'll have a chance to explore a little bit of that today. Joining us, I believe, this is not a mistake on my part, you're joining us from Calgary. Is that right,
That's
Twyla?
right, Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Well, thank you. Welcome to the podcast. First question before we get into mistakes, is the name Twyla more popular now after the show Schitt's Creek has been so popular?
A good question. It was funny because when I have obviously had my name for all my life, and usually people would say, where did that come from? And then once Schitt's Creek became popular, I actually didn't catch on to Schitt's Creek until people started to say, did you know, are you from, do you watch? And so then I started watching Schitt's Creek, and I was like, all right, I feel comfortable having the same name as a character from that show, because that show is just brilliant.
It was, and Twyla was amongst the most level-headed of anybody in that town.
That's true, and ended up being the richest, as we learned at the end. So,
right. But spoiler alert.
Yeah.
No, I think people have had a chance at this point. So, so Twyla, diving into what we normally talk about here, looking back at the different things you've done in your career, what would you say is your favorite mistake?
My favorite mistake, honestly, is one of overwork. Overwork that led to burnout, that led to not taking care of myself and not taking care of my relationships. I mean, as you've kind of highlighted in introing me, I'm an extremely motivated person. On top of my career, I'm a runner. I like having goals and having things to work towards. But that caught up with me about 5 years ago. And so at the breaking point of this mistake of overwork and burnout, I took a trip to Bali. So of course, the superficial reason that I would call this my favorite mistake is because I got to go on a trip to Bali. But it was more than just a trip to Bali. It was a trip that I took by myself, and a trip that I enrolled in a 7-day silent retreat. So I know that you're also an introvert. So as a fellow introvert, I'm sure you can imagine that no talking, no communication for 7 days straight was actually really refreshing. And it actually refueled me and got me regrounded and really brought back my perspective of what's important. And even though I am still a motivated individual, and I recognize that inside of that journey, I could be a motivated career woman, but still have that perspective of what's important and keep grounded with my relationships. And I can't achieve big things if I'm not healthy and my relationships aren't healthy. So this trip to Bali really teed up the next chapter of my personal development. And it really queued up my exploratory journey to being in this constant mode of learning and learning more, not just about technical skills, as you mentioned, I'm an accountant, but more about myself and who I am, what I'm really passionate about, what I have to offer the world, and what skills I want to continue to develop, and what I really want to do next to contribute and have a big contribution. And so little did I know also that this was also prepping me for what was next. Meaning since that time, about 5 years ago, I've co-founded a fintech company. I'm contributing to the evolution of the global accounting industry. I'm now supporting my mother, who has been severely impacted with health challenges. And I'm nurturing a daughter who's on the autism spectrum that's now become a teenager and has having to adapt to all the things that come with being a teenager, even though she's not cognitively ready to be a teenager. So this mistake of burnout was really, the result of overwork that became a pivotal time for me to get back into the driver's seat and to really be intentional about what I want to spend my time and my energy doing, both professionally and personally, and to remember to keep space for my relationships, and also for my industry and for the companies I work with, and as a mother, and most importantly, space for myself.
Wow. So, I mean, I think there's a lot. Maybe we can kind of go back and unpack some of the journey that you took to that point. So it sounds like not doing that trip or not doing some getaway like that to reset would have been a mistake. That really was a pivotal moment. And what led you to the point of saying, hey, I need to do this or something like this?
Yeah, I mean, really, I would say the mistake was that I wish, and if you talk about doing something over, it'd be like, I shouldn't have let myself get that far. I shouldn't have gone to that point. But to be honest, what called it out and what prompted that trip was somebody else calling me out on it. And it took somebody else to say, hey, this isn't good anymore. And that particular person was my husband, who was like, hello, remember us over here? And at the same time, I knew that I wasn't giving myself the attention I wanted to give myself, my daughter the attention that she deserved, because of course, being on the autism spectrum, she tends to get a lot of my attention, but she still didn't get what she deserved at that time. And then my husband, who was, being extremely patient, who finally said, wait a sec, like, what about us over here? How do you expect for us all to continue as a family unit when we're so detached because you're working so much and you're so deep into these goals and initiatives professionally that you didn't, you've kind of neglected the other side of the equation. And so he called me out on it. And when he first called me out, I was in denial. I was like, what are you talking about? There's no problem here and everything's good. And then he called me out again, and I was like, all right, now that I've come off of my ego trip and my bit of a self-defense mechanisms that come into play when you get called out on something, then I was able to say, all right, I think that there is something here and I want to fix it. And it needs to start with me before it goes to us, and then before it extends to my daughter and my parents and all those relationships that really matter.
Yeah. So how did you decide that, like, this trip, and in particular a silent retreat, or doing that in Bali, how did you decide that that would be a good reset, or what gave you an inkling that that would be a good thing to go and do?
Well, it wasn't the first time that I've done some self-reflection. I know enough about myself. I knew that I was introverted. I know that being around other people isn't what refills me or re-energizes me, that time alone or time in quiet spaces is what re-energizes me. So it just, when we got to the point of recognizing, okay, I need some time. I need to take a break. This is burnout at its finest. This isn't healthy for any of us inside of this family unit, and especially for me. Then it was kind of this experiment of, what do I think would be what I need? And just started doing some good old Google research and checking out what is it I want to do next, and be able to get a real reset. And I first just thought about doing a trip alone and taking some time and some space for myself, and do journaling and do reflection, do the things that I needed to do, or just do plain nothing. And then started to explore a silent retreat. And then there is some here in North America that I explored first, and then found this one in Bali, and it just got me super excited. And to be honest, was as reasonable, if not more reasonable, investment-wise, as the ones here locally. And I've traveled to other places alone before, so it wasn't my first adventure on a train or a plane by myself. But it just prompted me. I like warmth. Even though I live in Canada, I like the warmth of the sun, and I enjoy being heated by the sun and being outdoors, not skiing, but rather in the summer when it's nice out. And so it all just kind of started to align. The dates and timing started to align and started to make sense.
Now, it sounds like you were saying it was, there was no speaking. Was this also a digital detox? When you say no communicating, that mean no devices,
That's right.
No social media,
Nothing.
nothing.
You,
Tell me more about how that
Yeah,
was.
you were supposed to check everything. So you did have access to your phone should an emergency come up, but they highly encouraged you just to turn it off. And so I did. I turned it off completely. Once I had let my family know I've made it, I'm safe, I know all is well, I'll see you in 7 days, or you'll hear from me in 7 days. And so I did turn it off entirely. We didn't talk to one another inside of the retreat. So there's other folks taking the retreat along with me. There was no speaking to them. There was no speaking to wait staff. So when you got your meal, there was no speaking to them. It was very, very quiet, very serene. Almost at times would catch you going like, what is happening? And you kind of get really aware of the thoughts in your head when there's no other distractions and no other voices. So putting the phone away was tough because I am very connected on social media and it's hard now with emails, and that time that we didn't have Slack, but you're just so connected. We had text messaging obviously, and so putting that away was quite refreshing in and of itself, let alone then not having any sort of music, not having any other conversing. The hardest part, to be honest, was when you had staff at the facility put your meal in front of you to not say thank you. That was the most difficult thing. Or somebody, you're walking and you meet somebody on the path you almost then didn't make eye contact with them because it would naturally be, you'd start to get to know them because you'd see them, not because you could talk to them, but you would see them. So then you almost didn't make eye contact with them anymore because you're afraid that you would say something, until a few days in, when then the eye contact actually started to mean something, and you would create eye contact and you'd smile at them and at least have that human interaction in that way, but certainly no voice talking or no hand gestures of any sort.
Yeah. So then with a week of that, what happened when you come back to the world, your family, back to the idea of work?
Yeah, it was a different perspective. And to be honest, when I first came out of it, I spent 2 or 3 days still in Bali because I was like, this is going halfway around the globe and I might as well take advantage of a little bit of time, even though I knew I needed to get back to my work and my family. But I did take a couple of days. And to be honest, in those couple of days, everything was overstimulating. I had these big intentions of, I'm going to go walk the streets of Ubud and I'm going to see the tourist sites. And it was busy in that city center. And about 2 hours in of walking and exploring, I was like, I got to go back to the hotel room because this is just too much at once. So certainly there's a bit of you should really reintroduce yourself with something like that. But because I had that time in Bali afterward, and then, gosh, it was like a full day of travel to get back to Canada, that I had time to really do a lot of reflection and think about, what does this look like now when I see my family again? What does it look like on Monday morning when I go back to work and I see all these emails that have accumulated since I've left, and I've got my staff who needs me because I haven't been there for over a week. And so I had to kind of prep myself for what that was going to look like and feel like and how I was going to settle into that. But when I was so grounded, I felt really confident in knowing that, okay, this needs to be a portion of my life, meaning my work, not all of my life. And with my family, I was just so excited to hug them and to reconnect with them and to share a lot about my experience, because you spend this time really going through this journey and you don't share it with anybody. And it's not even like if you're on a trip by yourself where you send your family members messages or pictures, look at what I just saw. You don't do any of that. And so there was lots to share, but I had more gratitude and wanting to just embrace them as a way of thanking them for giving me that space and giving me that time to be able to kind of disconnect and reconnect with myself.
Yeah. So then once you had the opportunity to reflect on that trip and to think about your burnout and the causes and what led to that, were there any insights that came to you or other lessons about how to prevent getting back into the same cycle? And I'm sure a trip to Bali again some years later would again be nice, but What did you do to try to prevent falling back into old patterns, old causes of burnout?
Part of it was the journey of learning more about myself that has helped me prevent going there. Now, I'll tell you, it's easy to think about slipping back there. It's like, if you're an ex-smoker and then all of a sudden some of the other habits kind of come around you, and then you're like, this is the time when I would light up a cigarette. You can still have that inside of burnout, because it's burnout that's not due to a bunch of life circumstances happening all at once. It won't necessarily align again. This was pure overwork. And I like my work. I really enjoy working. So it's easy to slip back there. So part of it has been recognizing more of myself and what I need or don't need in order to kind of keep that balance, and to catch myself earlier in the stages of kind of slipping there versus getting all the way there and like, whoa, that slope is super slippery and here I am again. I'll tell you, I would love to go back to Bali. It's on the bucket list to go back there. My daughter desperately wants to go. When I came back, she saw the pictures and that I had taken, and now she's been talking about going. And at that time I told her 10 years. Now we're at 5 years. She's counting down. She's got a memory that's incredible. So I expect to go back there someday, but you don't necessarily need to do that again, or I don't feel I need to do that again in order to reconnect. It's more of a prevention strategy, and then oh, this is going too far, pull back. And the reality with pulling back is you can usually take a personal day or cut yourself off of connections for a weekend or whatever that is that would just be enough to, all right, pull you back. And I even did this over the past weekend, where I spent Sunday going through, okay, what are the things that I'm working on right now, and what deserves how much of my time? And literally doing it like a pie chart. I mean, you mentioned I'm an accountant, the numbers mean something to me. And so it was a time for me to, I kind of finished off some things I was doing for my parents. It was time to settle back into my work, make sure that my husband and my daughter are getting what they need from me. It was a time to be like, okay, pause. Let's make sure I'm not totally out of alignment here, and actually taking the time to do that and recognizing when you need to do that. And that's very individual, obviously. But for me, it's something's feeling off here, gut check. Let's just put this on paper and make sure that we're where we should be so that we don't go into old habits.
Yeah, catching it sooner rather than letting it get as far progressed as it had been before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.